Hey everyone, it's Vanessa Callahan, and I'm so excited to welcome you to the Calm, Empowered Parent podcast. Together, let's challenge the idea that parenting has to be perfect. We know that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to raising children, and while love is the key, it sure helps to have the right tools for the job. Raising resilient humans is intensely personal and even transformative work, and I'm here for it. Let's laugh, cry, heal, and learn together. Here we go. It's my great pleasure to welcome Katerina Barron. She's here. And many of you have encountered other people in your community who are generous with their time, with their energy, who are really committed to cultivating community and supporting the people's lives that they touch. And Katerina is one of those people. And one thing that has always stood out to me about Katerina is that she's always really an open book about what adversity, what triumphs, what tribulations she's experiencing. And that's so helpful to bring the conversation to a more genuine and meaningful place. And something you should know is that she herself is neurodiverse and a mother of 3 neurodiverse kids, ages 12, 8, and 4. So it goes without saying that life is nonstop and often chaotic. However, she manages to pull it off and, pull from her educator and classroom experience and move all of those great experiences towards service. And in this case, coaching folks by using trauma-informed practices. And she can teach healthy communication, guide emotional processing so that her clients can have the closeness in the relationships they've always dreamed of without past trauma getting in the way. And making sure that we are looking at our whole selves, past, present, and future, as we're thinking about how to heal and how to be our best authentic selves. And I can't think of another place besides parenting where we'd want to be our best and most authentic selves, ideally. And so what I've seen Katerina do is that she definitely practices what she preaches in personal life and parenting, or with her own 3 kids, which is why I asked her to join our staff this year as a coach in training. And you should all know too that more recently in her professional life, she realized that a lot of kids fell through the cracks through the pandemic. And now with that school trauma and needing to have ways of navigating that alongside, supporting their learning, kids need trauma-informed tutors. And so she's combined her trauma-informed coaching and teaching background to tutor neurodiverse students. And so this is one big-hearted mama, and I can't wait for this conversation. Welcome to the podcast, Katerina.
Oh my God, you're gonna make me cry. Like that, the beginning of that intro, I was like, wow, I love being here. Thank you so much for all of those kind words. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, and we're here today to do a little retrospective because I want folks to get a sense of, although I could just brag a lot about all of your accomplishments and kind of lift you up as this example, I think it's important that we get really real about what was not working when you first found, this mentorship program. I know that, someone in common from season 1, actually, Sarah Kowalski, was an episode on boundaries. She was one of our introductory points. She helped us get to know each other. And I just remember her saying, I think this family could really use your help, Vanessa. Make sure that you talk to her, make time for her. And I remember you bringing to me so much desire for change. And I wonder if you could just paint a picture for us, some of the things you were going through in our early work together.
Yeah, it's so crazy. It feels a lifetime ago, honestly, because it was not post-pandemic by any means, but it was not full-blown lockdown. So it was such an odd time. And I was really struggling in my marriage at that time. And me and my husband were on the same page about parenting. I come from my educational background. I had classroom management experience. And I understood children development, and I wanted to bring that to my parenting. And he was more old school in his approach, and we were really butting heads. It was causing a lot of tension in our family. And my daughter was having meltdowns daily, throwing lots of tantrums. I would have to physically restrain her so she wouldn't hurt herself and others. I had a baby. Oh my gosh, I had a
I
baby.
know, your little one.
He
So
was
little.
one.
Yes.
one when we started working together. So I had a 1-year-old, a daughter who was having like massive meltdowns daily, and then a Darrow who was at the time about to turn 9. And along with like the developmental stage of like starting to turn 9, him and his dad were just really butting heads. And I felt like I was playing referee all the time. I just felt really helpless and a little hopeless and was like, I don't know what to do. But because of my previous education and I had really good friends who were working with Vanessa, I was led to this community, and it feels like such a lifetime ago because we've changed. We've been through so much since then. And like I've watched my children grow, and like our household is, we can talk about the results at the
Yeah.
end, but I just feel like so much more calm now. Like looking back, I'm like, oh, thank God. Because it was so intense back then.
What I remember is that there seemed to be a lot of pending decisions that you sort of knew you need to make, but weren't really sure how to really step into them fully at first. So walk us through a bit of like what happened over the next months as you had this community up and under you.
Yeah, that was kind of the craziest part of my, Vanessa emergent origin story is that I entered with my now ex-husband. And because of all of this tension and like trying to get on the same page about parenting, and I knew that there was a lot of issues there, but I didn't quite feel like I had the support to essentially end the relationship and ask for a divorce. Like I was like, I felt like I hadn't tried everything yet. And I was like, there's got to be one more thing that can save this thing. There's got to be one more thing. And it didn't save the marriage. Like entering the immersion, like didn't save the marriage, but like it saved me in a way where it like was this safety net that I was like, oh, I have people to go to. I have people to support me. And if I do choose to end this, 8 year marriage, I know that I have people to support me through that big decision. And it was the hardest decision I ever made. Like I still like get a little choked up thinking
Yeah.
about like that time of making that decision. It was so heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking for my kids. It was heartbreaking for me, and simultaneously, it was like the absolute best thing we could have done for our family. And I don't think I would have had the strength to do it without support.
These kinds of things I would almost put into this larger category of like major life transitions. We've had folks in our program experience major life transitions and then say, thank goodness I had the community underneath me. And also people who are in other kinds of communities who had the support underneath them. And what I'm hearing you say is similar to what some of other folks that I've worked with and just people I've encountered in life and including in my own life. It's like a major life transition, major decision that leads to a major life transition. And oftentimes it's the magnitude of this big transition on the other side of the decision that holds us back from making that plunge or making that decision. So tell us a little bit more about like how you were experiencing that decision and what helped you be brave enough to kind of step into the unknown.
I think at the time I was so in that helpless, hopeless kind of mode that I described earlier. Like everything was just so intense. And I remember having the thought, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, like there has got to be a better way. There has got to be something different. And coming from, and the truth, this was like a huge transition for me personally, like not just in this relationship, but also realizing like I had been in situations and had been tolerating this type of treatment my whole life. And then it just like all came to a head after having our last baby when he was a year old and being like, there's got to be something different. Like, this is not working. And I don't know what to do, but I have to do something. And then I started just realizing I've tried this. I've tried therapy. We've tried this. We've tried this. We've tried this. And I went, oh, wait a minute. I've tried everything except for the one thing that I really don't want to do because it's going to devastate my family. And so I realized I got to the point where I was like, what would happen if this person was no longer in our home? And I just started thinking about the times where he wasn't around. Like we all felt more at ease. And I was like, I don't want to do this. But at that point, it didn't even feel like a choice. It felt like the only path forward. And it was so clear. And I was terrified and I was so unsure because I was like, what if this is not? But at the same time was like, it felt like the only way forward. And then it was very much confirmed that that was the best decision when my son came to me and said, life is so much better now that you and dad don't live with each other anymore.
So confirming. And I just imagine how that felt for you in that moment. So many things, I'm sure. For folks who are also facing down a big decision, and it doesn't have to be about the end of a relationship, it could be about a lot of things. Moving across the country is something that folks have gone through. Having to be the full-time caregiver for an aging, parent, and just having to leave their career for a while. Like there's just been really big decisions that have happened right within our community. What have you seen this community in particular do, who are kind of coalescing around this idea of resilience and stepping into parent leadership, et cetera, especially in their second, third, fourth, fifth years in the program, like you yourself are in a third year? Like, what have you seen this? How is this community showing up that gave you that bolster or a bit greater sense of security to step into this unknown and see what happens? I mean, what a brave thing to do.
Yeah, I just knew that if I let everything fall apart, that the community there were tools available, and there was like something to anchor onto. Like I use the word anchor probably like to death at this point, but there was like anchor is like such a big theme in my life. Like I could continue showing up every other Wednesday and I knew there was like that anchor of support. And people in this community show up very vulnerably and like share what's really going on. And that's something different. Like, people show up and they just ask their question, how do I get my kids to eat dinner? That's not this community. This community is like, I am dying. I am so tired. My kids won't eat their dinner. Like, I don't know what to do. And like, there's just like this sense of vulnerability. And I think watching that modeled in other members, I was like, oh, I can show up and be vulnerable too. And I
Right.
know that it got me.
Yeah.
I think that was probably the biggest thing. Like that's how people in this community show up, and it allowed me to show up that way as well. And I think me showing up so vulnerably, which is kind of like who I am anyway, it's just like a cascade effect of like vulnerability feeds vulnerability and safety.
Yeah. And what I'm noticing is like, just like children, when you have a secure base, then you feel safer exploring. And
Mm-hmm.
so what I saw other members doing, but I especially saw you doing, Katerina, and part of why you kind of gobbled up so much of the curriculum in your first year, especially, and definitely in your second year, is that I think you did feel that safety. And then you were like, oh, I'm actually free to explore these tools and strategies so that you could step into the practical side of the program of like, tools that you could use and try right away. So walk us through a few of the tools and strategies that you learned that helped you the most as you were kind of finding your way through this survival mode to a more stable place. Curious what really stood out to you then.
Yeah, so two things that like I used the most in the beginning were like we were very disconnected from each other because we had gone through this really big transition. We were kind of trying to like learn how to relate to each other again in this new
Yeah.
life. And so like connect before you correct was like my go-to for a long time. And then when I learned like brain in the palm of the hand model, like, and we talked about like lid detecting, like noticing the cues of like when your child is amping up, that became my like absolute ride or die tool because I started like in my work, it's essentially attunement.
Right.
In my work that I do, like we use the word attunement a lot, and like lid detecting is attunement to your child and going, oh, even if you don't know exactly what's going on, you can just go, something's not right, they're not themselves, and then take a pause to get back on track before you like push through. And because pushing through does not work for my kids. They will shut down,
Yeah.
explode. It's either they completely shut down or they explode. Like there's no pushing them out to their limit because of their neurodiversity. Like my daughter, we just got a diagnosis a couple of weeks ago that she's autistic, which would have been really helpful at the time back then, but we didn't have that. And I was like just learning about my own neurodiversity. But that is like lid detecting for all kids. You can catch them just at that moment and pause. And I call it like entering the eye of the storm and just like take a breath, or like that was absolutely crucial to being able to get through all of these things.
And I remember you studying so closely, like all the variety of like possible coping tools and strategies at like our emotional mastery weekend. And then more recently, as we brought in our occupational therapist, Coach Catherine Dunn, who, by the way, we did an episode in episode 1.
You're obsessed with Catherine.
Yeah, of course. I am too. We all are. And getting clues from our child's tantrums, meltdowns, and power struggles about like what sensorial inputs might actually be helpful, not only in the moment, but preventatively. I mean, there's all these pieces that can come, but if we're not willing to think of it as a lid popping off, like that they're dysregulating, and it's an automatic response. It's not a choice usually, especially with neurodiversity, but for all nervous systems, we can also detect our own. And I love that. We're actually dedicating an episode in this season 2, episode 2 on emotional mastery. And we talk about the lid. So those of you who are not sure what we're talking about, or just getting a sense of it, and are curious for more, go check out episode 2 of this season 2. But I think, as folks get attuned to their kids, and as you get more attuned to each of your children, you started to like refine your approach. And I guess over time, you got out of survival mode. And I think you mentioned to me that now you can even go to, a training and you'll pull like 3 tools per kid, that sort of thing. You can kind of run many things forward at the same time. But what would you say is the most important thing you've learned through this parenting work especially about parenting your particular children?
Yeah, that what works for one kid is not going to work for the other. Specifically, my kids, like my oldest has ADHD, and my middle is autistic, and then my younger one, jury's still out, but we suspect a little spicy mix of both. And what works for one doesn't work for all of them. So I've tried like family systems of like motivation, and they need a really individualized one-on-one approach. And like Adaro, he really thrives when we spend quality time together before I have any big request. And like Sedona really thrives with a checklist. Adaro is going to look at that checklist and be like, absolutely not. Like he does not need a checklist. Like his checklist is his worst nightmare. But if I come in and like ask him about a video game or like enter his world, that's another tool that I use with him. Like if I really get in his world, and then as I'm leaving, be like, oh, by the way, buddy, remember you promised that you would take those dishes downstairs? Like it's a game changer. But if I do that with my daughter, she immediately is like, you're trying to manipulate me. She's like, absolutely not. Like, are you trying to like ask me about Minecraft so then I'll do something for you? And I'm like, well, not really, but
You might have caught me there, honey. And she's like, please, direct communication, mom. I can handle it.
Yeah. So exactly.
Yeah.
I'm like, Sedona, I need you to pick up your room today. I need you to feed
Right.
or whatever. And then I make the checklist, and she's fantastic with the direct, concrete communication,
Yeah.
And then younger one, he's feral. I don't know. I don't know. We're still trying to figure him out.
A lot of what we've been moving towards with your younger one is like more physical aspects, like more concrete, not only because of his age, because he's a very physical guy.
Okay.
Right?
Actually, this just happened yesterday. You're going to love this. Ellington really vibes to, maybe because I caught him young, like we have feelings chart and what to do when I'm angry chart, like hanging on our wall from the
from the retreat.
Mastery retreat. And he loves like going over all of those. And then we talk about like different types of breathing. Like he really likes like roller coaster breathing and all those things. And the other day my lid was done. It was done, and I just still needed to I was still required to parent. And I was like, I'm gonna sit on the couch and do some roller coaster breathing would anybody like to join me? And then I'm like doing it. And then
Right.
Daryl came down and I'm just like being really kind of like silly. And I'm like, we're doing roller coaster breathing, Daryl. Would you like to join me? And he rolls his eyes and walks away. And then Ellington just brings a book, sits it next to me and sits down and starts. And other two kids are like, hell no, mama, I'm not going to.
Not
I'm not
it.
going to smell the flower and blow up a candle with you. But Ellington, I was like,
There.
okay. And we both regulated. And then we read a couple books together. And then we were back on track.
Yeah. And I just want to point something out that you haven't named yet, but I think is really important to highlight here. And I do it all the time in the immersion. And you won't be surprised once I say it, which is how powerful it can be, especially for the little ones, to model the behavior you seek.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like another kind of concept or tool. So it's like, okay, if I want my kid to use the calm down corner, then I need to take myself to the calm down
Yeah,
corner. If I want my child to interrupt politely and, kind of use respectful language, and I need to interrupt politely and use respectful language. If I'd like my kid to try a coping tool, like a breathing tool, then how about I go first, right? I sit down and I do it. And I love that story you just because I literally what you said, you're like, guess what I'm doing over here,
I
I'm
felt
just
like an insane person. And
let
I'm like,
everyone know.
I'm just going to roll with it.
Well, one of my favorite things to say too is, and you've heard this too, Katerina, I think you just did it, is like you think out loud how you want your kids to think for themselves. So saying I'm noticing I need to take a roller coaster breath, even just that
Yeah.
like flash of like modeling some self-awareness and making a choice, a constructive choice of what to do with that awareness. I'm aware that I'm not, and my lid's off, and my choice is that I'm going to, use a breathing tool. And then also that invitation for others to join is lovely.
Yeah. And
So
also going back to what works for one doesn't work for all. When I used to try to do that with Sedona, she'd be like, if you say lid one more time. Do you remember when I was like, if you say
she's like, so the queen of over it. The queen of over it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's like, do not try those tools on me, mom.
Well, because she loves that direct communication. So just say, are you upset? Like she doesn't want to hear about a lid.
And it makes total sense. Like she's autistic. Like
Right.
she can't read between the lines. She needs, like, she takes everything literally.
Yes.
And like, so the adjacent modeling does not work for her. She's
Right.
like, just tell me what to do. Just tell me what you want from me. Otherwise, I'm not picking up your social cues, mom.
Yeah. Don't expect me to absorb it like a sponge. You need to just like actually like show me line by line what it is that you want from me right now. Okay, so with all this in mind, if you could go back, Katerina, to a time when you were making those brave decisions, those ones that were hard, where there was a lot of unknown on the other side, a lot of life transitions you were going to need to step through, which, by the way, that wasn't just one. There were many more to come, including moving. Now you have a new partner, like lots of things came afterward. So if you could reel things back to those lower moments, what would you whisper to yourself in the ear, knowing what you know now?
Like there's so many things, but also like sometimes the simplest thing is best. And it's like everything's gonna be okay. And you've got this. And like you're not alone in this, I think would be the biggest one. Like you're no longer alone in this. Like that shift, like you are no longer alone trying to figure it out, because for a long time that's how I felt. And that was kind of the reality. And it won't be like this forever. All of those kind of like mantra things that just kind of hit you right in the heart. Like it won't be like this forever. You're not alone anymore, and everything's gonna be okay.
As you listening, I hope you heard her and heard her heart in that. I know there's someone listening who needs to hear that today. So thank you for that, Katerina.
Yeah.
And some part of you,
Yeah.
I was gonna say, some part of you is
over
also taking that in today, because like, we're always still processing these big events even after they've occurred, as you, of course, as a trauma-informed coach.
Yeah, I always, even talking about it today, like I still get that lump in my throat and that like heavy chest feeling of, who I was back then.
Yeah.
And, I don't know if that'll ever go away, but it definitely gets less intense with time for sure, because because of all the support I've gotten and all the work I've done.
Yeah, hats off to you, Katerina. Really proud of you.
Thank you.
And it's also been an honor to like see this so close up. Like I said, Katerina is one who's an open book, and she brings her stories and her everything, triumphs, tribulations, everything into her work and into our mutual work in the program and in our coaching. So we're so lucky to have you and your wisdom. And I know that you're still also seeking support with things that change because kids continue to evolve. Your life has evolved. So since that time when your marriage ended and you had to, have, dad was no longer living with the kids anymore. You had that message from Adero that things were better.
Mm-hmm.
Walk us through a couple more of your big transitions, and that will help us set the stage for what I can support you with today.
Yeah. So, going through my divorce, I had, come out to my husband as queer probably a year before the divorce. And I was like, so also during this time, I was like exploring my own sexuality and like realizing like how being a queer woman was never an option in my upbringing, but that's very much like who I am. And my life path did up until that point when I decided to end the marriage, like didn't reflect who I really was. So also there was that huge transition. I'm realizing that I'm queer, and then I'm like grappling with like how do I like come out to my kids, and how do I come out to my community, and how do like which is also a huge transition, which I did very very slowly, and was such a ended up being such a beautiful process. And like when Adero found out, Adero overheard a conversation on the phone. I don't know if I've ever told you the story, and that's how he found out. I was talking to my cousin, and I'd already told her, and I was like talking to my cousin about something, and Adero heard, and his reaction wasn't, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're not straight. It was, why didn't you tell me sooner? He was like, how long have you known? And I'm like, I don't know, like 2 or 3 years. He's like, 3 years and you didn't tell me? And I was like, I'm so sorry, buddy. And it was like, and then it brought us closer together, and he ended asking all these like really intelligent questions for his age, and like I was able to have such like a healthy connected conversation with him about like growing up in a homophobic family, and like growing up around, like I didn't have any queer community members, maybe one, and the way they talked about them was like really negative. So it's like I didn't have these positive examples of like queer identity in my community, and it was ended up being such a beautiful kind of transition. We're gonna we keep using the word like life transition. And then during that time I also started dating my now partner Nicole, who is absolutely incredible, such a solid, vulnerable, healthy, strong, direct, caring person. Like I could like she's such an incredible human being, and I get to do life with her.
Right.
And then we went through this transition of bringing her into our lives. And I was like really kind of worried about that. And we did it kind of slowly. The kids kind of met her a couple times outside the house. And then things got kind of serious faster than we intended. So then she started like spending the night like once a week. And then we had a schedule. And that's where we really leaned on the tool of the immersion in this transition of her moving in, because we knew we wanted her to move in, but like with the kids and like my daughter struggling with transitions and all of these things, we made a chart of like the nights that you get to sleep in mommy's bed, and the nights that Nicole is going to come spend the night. And we like would talk about like taking turns and like sharing mommy's time, and like mommy's a person outside just being a mom. Like I hold multiple identities. Like I'm not just a mom, like I'm also a coach, and I'm also like an artist, and I'm also a partner. Like, and so that was also a beautiful conversation that came out of this too, is I started explaining my children, like having conversations with my children about who I am outside of just their mom. And then when Nicole moved in, the kids seemed like really okay with it. they, they still have, so this is probably what we'll talk about next, is like there's still some like transitions that need to happen as we like explore what role does she play in their lives, as like she's my co-parent and she's my support system as I'm parenting them, but like how much of a parent is she going to be to like the older two? Whereas like Ellington, like she's been around almost half his life at this point. So it feels like that was like a much easier transition. But with the older ones, what we're kind of exploring right now is we know that she's my support as I'm supporting them, but I don't want to feel like a single parent with a partner in the home. And she wants to be involved with the kids, but with older kids, there's like, it's a little tricky. And that's something we're like still actively navigating. And we try to lean on quality time, but yeah, there's still some things that we're working through with that transition. Like it's still very much an active process.
Yeah, and I have personal things to share about this, having grown up in a two household, makeup from the age of 2. I had, my mom's house, my dad's house, and then my stepfather joined our household around 6, 7 years old on my mom's side. And then my stepmother joined the household when I was around 10 years old on my dad's side. And then I also joined a household for my, to help raise my stepchildren who are now in their 20s as a bonus parent, as a stepmother, and married their father since divorce. But, had that time where there was that ramp into the status of a stepmother. And I would say that every single of those experiences, as well as the folks that I've mentored over the past 20 plus years, whether it's as a classroom teacher or as a coach, where I got to really see the ins and outs of things, everyone does have sort of their pace of moving into that familiarity of being a true family member, and be considered core family. And so we can kind of look at what those stages are together a little bit, and maybe you can feel into which of those you feel like you're in and which one you feel like you're growing into. And it doesn't have to be all at once. Like, for example, I'll give you a few just to ground this with my stepson and my stepdaughter. My stepson was 10 when I just turned 10, and my stepdaughter was still 13. And in a way, my stepson was more open to like the hangs, like, oh, she's around and we hang out. Than my stepdaughter, who was like, who's this girl? Like, she told me later, she's like, who's this woman who's so obsessed with hula hooping? What's her deal? Because I was a hula hooper and I was really into hooping at the time. And she just was kind of like, who is this person? Right. Like this kind of, who's a stranger, like coming into our space. Whereas the stepson was like, oh, cool, another person I could show my stuff to, my Legos to, or whatever it might be, and was still filling me out, but wasn't maybe as concerned about what this all means. Whereas my stepdaughter had more concern about what it all meant. And then it was interesting, though, to see how that evolved, because as I reliably showed up, as the hula hoop obsession was not all that I was about, I actually had other interests and could like have a conversation with especially my stepdaughter about things she was interested in. I was remembering details about her friendships, her preferences. And she started to see that I was really putting effort into what was a budding like friendship between us. I still remember us doing kind of a family art project with some sidewalk chalk outside. And we were just drawing some patterns on the sidewalk. And then I went over to look over her shoulder to see what she was working on. And she was working on this really nice picture. She was taking a lot of time on it. And there were 2 adults and obviously like a teenager and like a slightly shorter like tween in this picture. There's a big like heart and like some rainbow kind of designs in the background and some like sunburst kind of things, like a very cheerful image. And what she had written is, in this house lives a happy family. And because I had moved in at that point, it's about a year in. And it was the first time that she had signaled to me that I was like in the inner circle. And I still like, it's like burned into the back of my brain in some beautiful place where it just like lights up my heart, where I can see that image as if I was looking at it right in front of me right now, because of how much that reflected back to me how she was experiencing me at that point. And I still get a little teary about it because it was just such a moment of love and acceptance. Now for my stepson, he let me into the play and into the daily life, like I said, much more easily. But for him to claim me as family, it actually took a lot longer. He needed to still process the fact that his parents weren't going to get back together. And he was, in the first year I was dating his father, he was still trying to like drag his mom and dad together at the school dance. to get them to dance together. Like he really wanted that to go back to that place and was processing quite a bit around it. But I think for him, it was when we had our wedding and really like my family became his family, and they really wrapped themselves around him with so much love. They're just like, how are you? How are you? How, what's going on new in your life? Hey, we're going to go on a trip. You want to come with it? Like just so inclusive of him. And I think he
Yeah.
realized that what he had to gain was like more people who love him and more
Yeah.
people who are going to like shower him with attention and with care and kind of take ownership of him a bit of like, you're ours too, right? Like you belong with us too. And I remember him saying to me, Vanessa, and this is like just one like wise words from a teenager, just like kind of in the summer lull, sitting. I don't remember exactly where we're sitting, but I will always remember the words. Might have even just been on the couch at home.
Yeah.
And he goes, Vanessa, the love I have for my parents is different than the love that we share. And I was like, oh, because we were not anything like this. It's not a sentimental conversation up until this moment where he's just like sharing his thoughts and his feelings and his heart with me. And he said, because with my mom, my dad, and my sister, like I kind of have to love them. I mean, they're my built-in family. But with a step parent and with a stepchild, like we are, it's loving each other as a choice. And so in a way, it's even more meaningful.
Oh my God.
And I mean, that just blew me
I'm dead.
away,
I'm like
blew me
crying
away
right now.
coming from this
So sweet.
young man, who was deep and really thinking on this level, feeling into this level and articulating it. It just hit me that they do have their own timing and they do have their own process around sort of coming around to bringing you into that inner circle of like that identity of we are family. And so I feel, I want to hear your reactions to this, of course, but I feel like what I want you to take away and what I want other folks to take away who are listening is that patience and consistency really do win out in the end. And also, it's not so much what you do and what you say, it's how you presence. I was a consistently, as much as possible, supportive, understanding, compassionate, and positive presence in their lives. And I still would speak up and be direct about things that weren't working for me or that we needed to work on. But it was always in that context. Like we say, four positives to every negative is the Gottman research, right? Around maintaining a positive relationships, like four
Yeah.
positive interactions to every negative. I think when you're building this kind of relationship that can go one way or the other, and it's very meaningful, it's more like a romantic relationship. It's closer to the 10-1. And one like hot tip would be to, as much as possible, start with deferring to the primary parent for discipline, and then making sure that the person is mostly observing and as almost like I'm learning what the expectations are here. I'm here to understand. I'm here to understand, not to establish myself as the authority, but I'm here to understand. And then if there is some need for them to fill in because you are stepping away to do work and now, Nicole, like your partner is with the kids, they can emulate you and even reference like, hey, I think your mom would want to happen here is this. And so that's like stage one. And then I think, on the kind of the tactic side, stage two would be more around, okay, now I can start to assert these things because I'm not learning this. I know this. And the kids have seen Nicole or the parent, right? The bonus parent learn it and really know it well. Like you're saying, you have 3 different strategies for 3 different kids, like help her, like we're going to help her get to the place where she knows what those are. And the kids know that she knows. So she gets to have this moment of just almost looking at them with that eye of like, and I know what would happen if your mom was here, like, and we can have that conversation, or we could just like do the thing we know we should be doing here, right? Especially with the older kids. So anyways, I've laid a lot out. Would love to hear where you feel like where things kind of are for you and Nicole in terms of like bringing her into the inner circle. Maybe it's different with each kid. We could start there. And I also want to hear some things you've tried, because I'm sure that you've already been putting some things in place that have been great. So
Yeah, I think hearing your story, I was like, oh, we're farther along than I think we are.
nice.
So that really stood out to me. Adaro and Sedona are like starting to ask Nicole for things like making requests. Like Adaro will ask her permission to go to the store to like buy a treat. And Sedona, who really struggles trusting people, does ask her to like make her snacks without, because I'd be like, hey, I'm busy. Can you ask Nicole? And she'd be like, no, I'll just wait till you're done. She is now like, okay, asking her. We still need to work on like how she asks her, because it's much more like a demand. But it's like, I think it's like because she's nervous, but she's doing it. So that's a big one. And then yeah, and Ellington is obsessed with her. Like Ellington is very much like, it's gone into like she's my mom territory. Like he's even used that language with us. So it's really interesting, like hearing the different stages with your stepkids, like that one was like good with the hangs, but like didn't let in as easy. And the other one was like as hesitant, because I definitely noticed that in the older two. Like Sedona was like, absolutely not. She's never going to be family.
Mm.
And but now is much more treating her like family, loves playing games with her, and it's family game night. So it's like, whereas before it was like, let's have family game night, and she's like, Nicole's not family. But now it's like, oh, let's have family game night, and it's implied that Nicole's part of that. So that was really interesting, that connection that I made. And then Adero was like, great, let her move in, fantastic, but it's still like, you're not my parent.
Yeah. Okay.
But
It's
it's,
just
yeah,
similar. Yeah.
yeah, it's so
Oh,
funny. And like it's like the, kind of like stereotypical gendered a little bit too.
perhaps. Yeah.
Like I don't know. But it just, your personal story made me feel like I was like totally on the right track.
Good.
And
Well, is there anything that you've done then that you think has aided in this? I think if each of us could highlight one or two things as a way to just help other folks out there who are blending families, who are maybe bonus parents or about to bring a bonus parent into their world.
yeah, I think not putting any pressure or requirement to interact or have a relationship. And I've always, a very trauma informed approach is like, this is here as a resource. You pick it up when you're ready, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like Nicole's there to support you, if you would like to ask her, but never making it a requirement.
Yeah.
And her, she is very good at noticing their interests
Yeah.
and get going in. Like she noticed right away that Sedona loves doing family game night, and that was her in with just like, so like that was her. Like
Yeah.
the
She got
parts
into
that
their world just instinctively. Yeah.
she initiates things that like
Mm.
I wouldn't have necessarily thought of. And
Amazing.
she's very observant and very attuned,
Yeah.
and like, but also can like feel the limit of where the kid's at. Like she's like, yeah, like I think like I'll be able to ask Adero, make a request of Adero if he's in the kitchen, but like still don't feel comfortable like going into his room. Like I'm not parent status
Right.
yet to like, go into his room and make a request. And she like follows their lead, but also like finds the ins where she can. And that's all her, which
Amazing.
which
Yeah.
is
Great instincts on that.
amazing.
Yeah. And she's
Absolutely.
going to be participating in the immersion all year as your,
And yeah, and
co-parent. So that's great too. I'm
she
excited for her.
shows up.
Yeah.
Like she's just that kind of person that when you ask her to show up, she shows up, and then she shows up even when you don't ask her to. She just like notices an opportunity and is like, hey, you need me? I'm here. And that has been game changer for me. And I just can't believe that this is my life. Going from when I first entered the immersion and how much turmoil we were in, like that word feels very,
Yeah.
and
Very real.
now this amazing supportive partner who is very caring and loving towards children that are not biologically hers. So it's a pretty vast difference.
It's also what I love. I want to highlight for folks two things. First of all, not to take things personally as the bonus parent. Those who are listening who are the bonus parent, it's really important. And I hope that our stories and our perspectives have helped sort of lay some groundwork for that. And saying like this is a natural part of the process, and don't despair. That breakthrough is coming in the near future, or maybe the distant future. But if you keep showing up in the way that represents your true intentions, I recently saw a definition of high quality communication is that what you intend to say is how it lands with the other person. or how you intend to, right? How you intend to, like, what impression you intend to have on others is the impression they take away from you. And so, yeah, just having that integrity and that consistency and that clarity of your intention and patience without taking it personally. And if you're starting to take it personally, go talk to someone outside of the family unit about it, like process it through, and then bring what you need back to your partner is another really important one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
because already the parent that is integrating you in is carrying a lot. And it's important to be sensitive to that too. And that's something that I definitely needed to do in my situations. And I know you are as well. So kudos to you, Katerina. I'm so proud of all the progress you've made. And you know that we take a bold stand, and you've kind of joined that mission at Raising Resilience, that parents deserve mentorship. What about this makes sense to you? Like, how do you feel about parents getting the help they need?
I think that another cliche thing that I say is like, we were never meant to do this alone. Like, that is actually not, that was never a human requirement, is to do parenting alone. And unfortunately, in the extremely capitalistic world that we live in, we've been separated because of that. And so we have to intentionally build community. And I'm just so grateful that there are people like you in the world who get that and get that we were never meant to do this alone, and create the space for us to come together and find the support and love and care that we need as individuals, so that we can be the best parents and show up the best we can for our kids.
Well, it's my honor. And I know that there are folks out there that would love to reach out to you and learn more about how you're working with neurodiverse kids as a tutor, and also your clients as a trauma-informed coach. So the best way I know that folks can reach you is by email at Katerina Barron, Barron at gmail.com. And check out the show notes. There'll be more ways to be in touch with Katerina, including hopping on one of her free clarity calls if you'd like to explore working with her. And of course, you can always join the Family Foundation's immersion. Learn more about that at www.vanessacallahan.com/parents, and check out what we have going on. We're so lucky to have Katerina on staff and other amazing folks on the other side of that. So again, Katerina, yeah, thank you so much for coming.
It's been a joy to be here.
As we wrap up, remember, there's no one-size-fits-all way to parent. Keep nurturing those strong family bonds and watch resilience bloom in your community. You've got this. And if you found this episode valuable, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You can also hop over to thecalmempoweredparent.com for current events and to grab your copy of the Calm Parent Strategy Guide. You can even learn how to bring our free and low-cost workshops to your school or community. Your support means the world to us and helps us empower more parents and children. Let's do this together.